You are alone in the room. You know this. You checked. The door is closed. The curtains are drawn. The house is empty. There is no one here but you. And yet something in your chest has gone quiet and tight, and the hairs on the back of your neck are standing up, and some ancient, wordless part of you is absolutely certain that you are being watched. You shake it off. You tell yourself it is nothing. You go back to whatever you were doing. But the feeling does not fully leave. It just retreats to the edge of your awareness and waits there. That feeling has a name. Scientists call it the feeling of being stared at, or sometimes hypervigilant social detection. Most people call it something they experienced once or twice and then tried to forget. But here is what no one told you. That feeling is not a glitch. It is not anxiety. It is not superstition. It is one of the oldest and most sophisticated alarm systems ever built by evolution, running perfectly as designed in a world it was never designed for. And understanding why it exists will change how you think about nearly everything. To understand the feeling, you have to go back. Not just to your childhood, not just to your ancestors. You have to go back to a time when being watched meant something very specific. It meant you were about to be eaten. Your oldest relatives were prey animals. This is easy to forget when you are sitting in a climate-controlled room with a refrigerator full of food. But for the vast majority of human evolutionary history, and for the tens of millions of years of primate history before that, being detected by a predator was the last thing that happened to you before you died. The animals that survived were not the ones who could outrun lions. They were the ones who detected the threat before the threat detected them. That meant one thing above all else: eyes. Eyes are the most dangerous thing in nature. Not claws, not teeth. Eyes. Because eyes mean attention. And attention, in the ancestral world, preceded attack. A predator that has spotted you has already begun the hunt. Your window of survival shrinks from that moment forward. The animal that sensed it was being looked at before it could consciously see the watcher was the animal that lived. Over millions of years, that sensitivity got wired very deep. Psychologist Rupert Sheldrake spent years collecting accounts of people who felt they were being stared at and turned around to find someone looking at them. He argued that this was evidence of a real perceptual ability, a kind of field theory of consciousness extending outward from the eyes. Most of his colleagues were skeptical of the mechanism he proposed, but his data revealed something important. The feeling is universal. Across cultures, across ages, across continents, the sensation of unseen eyes is one of the most commonly reported human experiences. It is not rare. It is not pathological. It is baseline human. The skeptics had an answer, of course. They said confirmation bias. You only remember the times you turned around and caught someone looking. You forget the hundreds of times you turned around and no one was there. That is probably true, at least partially, but it does not explain the feeling itself. It does not explain why the alarm goes off at all. That still requires an explanation. Psychologist David Marks ran controlled experiments to test whether people could reliably detect being stared at from behind. His results were mixed, and the methodology was contested. But what every researcher in this field agreed on, what was never in doubt, was that the brain allocates significant resources to detecting gaze. This is not controversial. This is foundational neuroscience. Your brain has a dedicated gaze detection system. It operates faster than conscious thought. It fires before you have time to reason about what you are perceiving. And crucially, it is calibrated to false positives. It is far better to think you are being watched when you are not than to fail to notice that you are being watched when you are. One of those errors costs you nothing. The other one costs you everything. This is the first key to understanding the feeling. Your brain is not trying to be accurate. It is trying to keep you alive. Accuracy is expensive. Speed is everything. And a system tuned for speed in a dangerous world will occasionally misfire in a safe one. But that is only part of the story. Because the feeling of being watched is not just a predator detection system, it is also a social monitoring system. And in some ways, that second function is even older. Primates live in groups. They have always lived in groups. And group life is, among other things, a surveillance network. Everyone watches everyone. Status is negotiated through gaze. Dominance is established through who looks at whom and for how long. An alpha male in a troop of chimpanzees does not need to do much. He watches. Others feel watched. The watching itself is the power. Psychologist Michael Argyle spent decades studying the role of eye contact in human social behavior. He found that gaze functions as a kind of social regulator. It signals attention, signals dominance, signals threat, signals intimacy, all depending on context. Sustained eye contact between strangers triggers a cortisol response. The body registers it as a challenge. The stress system activates. And this is in a safe, modern context. Now imagine what sustained eye contact meant in the ancestral world. It meant something was considering you as either a rival or a meal. Your nervous system has not been updated since then. This is why you feel uncomfortable when someone stares at you on a train. This is why holding eye contact too long in a conversation feels aggressive. This is why, when you look up from your screen in a coffee shop and find that a stranger has been watching you, your chest goes cold even though you are in a perfectly safe environment. The hardware is ancient. The software is running in an incompatible world. But there is a third layer. And this is where it gets genuinely strange. Your gaze detection system is not just sensitive to real eyes. It is sensitive to anything that resembles eyes. Psychologist Colin Clifford and his colleagues have studied how the human brain processes gaze. What they have found is that the brain has a strong prior toward interpreting stimuli as looking at you. Given ambiguous directional information, the brain assumes the gaze is directed at you rather than away from you. This is called the gaze ownership bias. Your brain defaults to assuming it is the target of attention, not because this is statistically likely, because the cost of being wrong in that direction is lower. Think about what this means in practice. Your brain is actively scanning for eyes at all times. It finds patterns that look like eyes in textures, in shadows, in the shapes of objects. It finds them in wood grain, in clouds, in the arrangement of leaves. This is not random. It is a detection system with its hair trigger set extremely light, casting its net wide, catching everything that could possibly be a face, a pair of eyes, a watching presence. Anthropologist Stuart Guthrie formalized this idea in his work on why humans are so prone to perceiving agents everywhere, to seeing faces in objects, hearing intent in wind, sensing presence in empty rooms. He argued that religion, animism, and the belief in invisible watchers are all downstream of the same cognitive mechanism, an overdeveloped agent detection system. The same system that kept your ancestors alive in the savannah is the system that makes you feel watched in an empty house. It is looking for eyes, and when real eyes are absent, it will find them in anything. You have almost certainly experienced this without realizing what it was. You have been walking down a dark street and felt certain something was behind you, only to find nothing. You have been alone at night and felt the specific weight of a presence in the room. You have glanced up from something you were doing and felt a certainty so physical that it was almost tactile. Someone is looking at me, and found no one. These experiences feel like malfunctions. They are not. They are your detection system running a pattern it has run successfully for 50 million years. The pattern occasionally produces false alarms. In the ancient world, the cost of a false alarm was a burst of adrenaline and a wasted sprint. In the modern world, it is the feeling of foolishness when you check the room and find it empty. That is a reasonable trade. Now here is what makes this even more complicated. The feeling of being watched does not only fire when you are alone. It also fires when the social stakes are high. And the mechanism is slightly different. When you are about to give a presentation and you feel 100 eyes on you, that feeling is the same gaze detection system, but now it is tracking social threat, not physical danger. The audience is watching. Their watching means judgment, and judgment in the primate world determined your standing in the group, your access to resources, your chance of reproduction. Being watched by your peers was not neutral. It was an evaluation, and failing that evaluation had consequences. Psychologist Mark Leary developed what he called sociometric theory, the idea that your self-esteem is not actually a measure of how you feel about yourself. It is a measure of how you believe others currently perceive you. Your self-esteem is a social monitoring instrument. It tracks the estimated gaze of your group, and it drops not because of internal failure, but because you detect or believe you are detecting social disapproval. The watched feeling and the judged feeling are the same feeling. They share a substrate. This is why public speaking is the most common human fear, more commonly reported than the fear of death. Because being watched by your group while performing, with the possibility of failure, activates something ancient and visceral. It is not just embarrassment you are afraid of. It is the ancient equivalent of being seen as weak, incompetent, unfit. Being seen that way, in a group-dependent species, had real consequences. Your nervous system does not distinguish between an audience of 1,000 and a rival tribe. It feels the weight of every set of eyes the same way, all at once, on you. But let us take this one level further, because there is a form of the watched feeling that is the most interesting and the most unsettling of all. It is the feeling of being watched when you are not just alone in a room, but alone in existence, the cosmic version. Across every culture, across all of recorded history, human beings have believed in invisible watchers, gods, spirits, ancestors, the eye of heaven, the universe observing. These beliefs are not random. They are not arbitrary cultural accidents. They emerge from the same system that makes you check over your shoulder in an empty corridor. Anthropologist Pascal Boyer spent years studying the cognitive foundations of religious belief, and what he found was that the supernatural beings that persist across cultures share a specific set of features. They are agents with minds and intentions. They have access to information you cannot hide, and they are watching. The gods that survive in human culture are not the gods who are simply powerful. They are the gods who see. Omniscience, not just omnipotence, is the core attribute. Because a powerful being you can hide from is manageable. A being that is always watching is inescapable. And your agent detection system, the one calibrated to find eyes in shadows, does not stop at the walls of a room. It scales up. It looks for the watcher behind everything. Boyer argued that belief in supernatural observers is cognitively natural, not in the sense that it is true, but in the sense that it is the expected output of a brain with an overdeveloped tendency to find agents, intentions, and eyes. You were always going to believe something was watching. The question was only who or what you would name. This is the architecture underneath your existential discomfort at 3 a.m. when the house makes a sound. Underneath the persistent sense that your choices matter to something larger than yourself. Underneath the feeling that you are, at some level, accountable to an unseen presence. These are not the outputs of irrationality. They are the outputs of a threat detection system running in conditions it was never designed for. The system was designed for one thing, to notice when something with eyes had found you. And it is very, very good at that job. So what do you do with this? Because the feeling does not go away just because you understand it. Knowing your smoke detector is sensitive does not stop it from going off when you burn toast. The alarm still sounds. Your heart still rates, still climbs. The hairs still rise. The answer is not to eliminate the feeling. You cannot. It is too old, too deep, too integral to survival. The answer is to recognize the source, to know, in the moment the feeling fires, that this is the sound of 50 million years of successful survival strategy running exactly as it was built to run. Your ancestors felt this. The ones before them felt this. Every time they felt it, it saved them. And now it is running in you, in a living room or an office or a parking garage, still doing its job, still scanning for eyes, still certain at some level that something out there is looking. The feeling you cannot explain is the oldest part of you, doing the only thing it knows how to do. Looking back,